Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started here in just a minute. I welcome everyone to our October Lunch and Learn. This is part of a series of webinars, not just from the GAA. We do a monthly webinar that is free and open to our members. This one is free and open to everyone because of a partnership with the U.S. Forest Service and Auburn University and Raising Trees and the Warnell School of Forestry. So it is brought to you in part free of charge because of a grant from the Forest Service. So thank you to them for providing this opportunity for this information to be shared with you. It is, like I said, part of a series. The series title is Business in Arboriculture, and it is designed to help people who are either continuing their career or just in the beginning stages of their career, kind of learn some of the ins and outs of business, and not just the practical side of looking at trees. Some things that some of us might not be aware of if we don't have any experience in that. So hopefully you'll find this information useful and important for your continuing business journey. The next webinar in this series is going to be in November, on November 14th, on efficient costing and budgeting. So I hope you'll join us for that. I don't have the information to register for that yet, but hopefully it will be made available to you soon. I will send out an email to everyone who has registered for this course, letting you know how to register for the next in the series. I just need to touch base with some of the other organizers to get that information to you. As always, just stay on top of your GAA emails in order to get that information. I'll also, after this webinar, I'll send you a link to the presentation as well as a video recording. So if you missed some information or have questions and want to reference it, you can go back and look at it. So I see some of you putting your ISA certification number in the chat. You don't need to do that. At the end of the presentation, I will be posting a link for you to click. And when you click that link, you can submit your ISA number to get the CEUs for this webinar. So again, that will be released at the end of the webinar, so stay on for the duration so that you can make sure to get your CEUs for attending. So I'm going to go ahead and stop talking and turn it over to Michael. Michael is the Director of DOT and Fleet Services at Keystone and has graced us with his presence today to talk about, DOT inspections and things that you need to know. Welcome, Michael. Thank you so much for joining us. One more quick announcement before we get started. If you have questions for Michael, please put those in the Q&A. We're going to save all the questions to the end of the presentation, and then we have allocated about 15 to 20 minutes at the end for him to answer those questions. So you feel free to put them in the Q&A as you think about them, but we're going to save them for the end, and that will be in the Q&A and not the chat. So feel free to talk amongst yourselves in the chat, but put Q&A in the Q&A. All right, thank you, and take it away, Michael. Thank you.
Okay, Jesse, thanks a lot. Let me try to do this real quick on sharing my screen. Okay. We'll swap that. Sorry about that. Okay, we're good. Oh. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, looks great.
Okay, good. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. As Jesse said, my name is Mike Kuiros, and I'm the Director of DOT and Fleet Services at Keystone Insurers Group. So what that means is I take a special look from a compliance standpoint at companies that do hold DOT numbers and hold large fleets. And we look for unique ways through compliance to really fix their issues and make them more attractive to the marketplace. Especially you guys knowing with all the storms and everything going on, when it comes to insurance, with all the Mother Nature issues and everything and the nuclear verdicts, there's a lot of things that are left kind of out of our control when it comes to insurance. So if you're actually compliant, which we're supposed to be compliant anyways, it actually does help us out with those things. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so just a little bit about me. Like I said, my name is Mike Kuiros, and my specialty is DOT and fleet. One thing that I want to point out here is our DOT compliance helpline. So that is our phone number that we have here. When you reach out to the number, you usually get a mailbox that you can leave your question in. You could also send it to our DOT helpline email. And if you see that's right there below, there's 9 DOT professionals that are connected to that email. And there's an array of questions you could ask. You got a violation, you're really not sure what to do with it, or you got a letter from the DOT. There could be a lot of different things that happen. One thing that I'll mention is this is free to everybody on this call for a few questions. If we basically keep a log of everything when we do get questions. So if they continue to go on, we do have a yearly fee for just the consultation piece. But like I said, if you have a couple questions here and there, please feel free to use the helpline. Okay, so some of the things we're going to be talking about today, we want to review the materials that are going to be needed for an on-site audit. And I'm sure that many of us on this call have been audited before. So what we're going to talk about is how to be proactive and be ready for when they do come. And obviously, to be successful at an audit is ongoing compliance. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, even with insurance, if we could just stay compliant and keep those processes and programs in place, it is going to help us in more than ways than one. There's 6 inspection factors when it comes to actually being audited by the DOT. We're going to talk about 5 of those factors. The one we're not going to talk about is hazmat because it's its own animal in itself. We're going to talk a little bit about common violations. We're really going to talk about how the violations that your drivers get, how that actually does affect your scores. And then we're going to talk about some help that is available to you. Okay, so we want to get ready. So that means, that you get a notification. So you get some sort of letter from the DOT. So what does that mean? Usually that is a pretty scary thought because you don't know what they're going to be looking at. But the things that we'd want to make sure that we have ready to go would be our driver qualification files, our vehicle maintenance files, proof of financial responsibility, including the MCS 90, a DOT compliant drug and alcohol policy, the educational material that you would actually give to your drivers, the certificates that showed supervisor drug and alcohol training has been completed. They're going to look at hours of service, so things such as logbooks, time cards, and ELDs if needed. They're going to look very specifically into vehicle maintenance, which a lot has to do with driver vehicle inspection reports. And if you see next to those two, the driver logs and the inspection reports, we have a month next to that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later. But basically, there's retention when it comes to everything DOT and compliance. The one thing I like to tell everybody is you should never have anything longer than what you're supposed to, because anything that's available would be auditable. And you could keep it in a separate file, just don't keep it with your DOT file. Things like vehicle inspector credentials and air brake mechanic credentials. And then for your drug and alcohol program itself, usually they're going to want to see at least 5 years. They call them MIS reports or year-end summaries. But basically, it's going to be something that's going to show all the pre-employments, randoms, positives, negatives. It's a whole synopsis of everything you did in the last year with no names tagged to it. The other part of that, too, is to make sure that you're hitting the random percentages, which is 50% for drug and 10% for alcohol. So we're going to go into a little more specifics on all these items here. So as I mentioned, these are the 6 factors that they actually look at when they come in to do an audit. General kind of covers, vehicle markings, some insurance stuff, which we'll discuss. The biggest factor is definitely the driver portion that talks mostly about drug and alcohol and driver qualifications. Then we get into a little bit of the operation of the vehicle, which really deals a lot with the hours of service portion. And then the vehicle maintenance and accidents. So if you see at the very top here, the on-site audit, when they leave, if it's a full-on audit and not a focused audit. And when I say focused audit, what that could mean is you have an issue with, let's just say, vehicle maintenance, and that might be all they're coming in to look at. Now, they could ding you and give you citations and have you fix things. However, you wouldn't actually get a score with your audit. So if they come in to do a full-blown audit, you will get a score of satisfactory, conditional, or unsatisfactory. So we want obviously to be satisfactory. However, there is a rating also called not rated, and that's also just as good as satisfactory. Okay, so in factor one here, things that they're looking at is entry-level driver training. This should not be new to anybody at this point. It's been around. Um, there is a way to look it up on the FMCSA website. So if you have some of your drivers that you want to look up to see if they've had entry-level driver training, and that would be anybody that since the regulation change, which is in 2022, that changed from a class B to a class A or added some sort of endorsement or went from a CLP to a CDL, they have to go through what's called entry level driver training. And like I said, there is an FMCSA website that you'd be able to type in their license number and you'd actually be able to look up to see if they have that training. This is nothing it was kind of a big deal in the beginning. Now that it's been around, it should be really nothing new to anybody, and should be in good standing here. For the insurance, the level of financial responsibility, that's only going to be if you have an MC number. And an MC number means that you guys are for hire. Okay, so that means for you guys, I don't see a lot of you being for hire. When you're for hire, think about that you're actually hauling for another person. So an example, you go to point A, you pick something up that is not yours, but you're contracted to take it from point A to point B. I just don't see you guys having to do a lot of that. Now, some of you guys might have something extra where you do some hot shot stuff or something like that. So in those cases, you would need to have this. And those are typically from 750,000 to 1 million, and that's for bodily injury and property damage. And it's also something that needs to be connected from your insurance carrier to the FMCSA. And remember, it's only if you have an MC number. Now, something that's separate from that is called an MCS 90. And once again, the FMCSA would be asking for this if you have an MC number. The MCS 90 essentially is just a promise to pay. It's actually issued from your insurance carrier and it's countersigned by them. And really all it shows is that you have the coverage in place. So it's not a certificate of insurance or anything like that. All it is a promise to pay and show that you have the coverage in place. And then here from the schedule of limits, if you see, this kind of shows the different types. As I mentioned before, most of us would be 750,000. Some of us maybe in that million. Unless you're doing some high hazmat type stuff is the only time you'd get into that 5 million range. Okay, so some general safety regulations that they're going to be looking at. We talked about the insurance and filings, accident reports and accident registers. The next slide here, as you can see here, is an accident register. And what that is, if you see on this section here, the number of injuries, fatalities, and towaways. An easy way to remember this, I always say, is nurse, hearse, or tow. Nurse meaning if there's any medical involved, that can mean that your driver hit somebody else, your driver is absolutely fine, but that other person needs some sort of medical, then that would be a recordable accident. Any fatality, that would be a recordable accident. And once again, if any towaway, doesn't need to be your vehicle, but if another vehicle is towed, that would be part of the register. The other thing is the accident reports. You know, all of us should have, anytime there's an accident, we should have a file on that specific accident. You know, some of the things that would be in there would be like your own internal investigation and employee statement. Anytime that there would be a police report and any sort of follow-up stuff, we should have a file specifically for that accident. But if the DOT comes in, they would ask for something like that. But they are definitely going to ask for your accident register. Vehicle markings, you have to have the name of the company, and the name of the company is to be identical to what is on the MCS 150. A lot of times we don't see that, so to make it easier, you could actually add a DBA pretty simply on your MCS 150 if your logo or name on the vehicle doesn't match up exact. That all usually does depend on the officer that's actually pulling you over or going through the inspection with you. But from a compliance standpoint, the regulation states that the name of the company needs to be exact compared to what's on the MCS 150, and then the US DOT number on both sides of that vehicle. One thing real quick I just wanted to mention about your accident register is that it's from 3 years from the date of the accident. So when you have this item here, it truly is a running document because as that third year comes on, that accident would basically fall off. So this would be a running document. Okay, factor two, we're going to jump into 382, which is drug and alcohol. And if you see here, one of the things they're going to ask for is a DOT written specific policy. Now, what's interesting is the DOT has a very specific policy that they want written and the items that they need to have in there. And if you see here, that is pre-employment, random, post-accident. reasonable suspicion, return to duty, and follow-up testing. So a lot of times, one of the things that we do is mock DOT audits, which is a preventative type thing because we're not the DOT. We come in and try to find all your issues before the DOT does, and then give you tools and education to be able to fix them. A lot of times what I see is it's in an employee handbook, and it's usually just a small blurb that talks about drug and alcohol, but it does not cover the specifics as far as what the DOT would be looking for in an audit. The other thing that would be part of that is additional from the actual policy is employee education, and that is a handout and a sign off. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but which would be supervisor training. So that's reasonable suspicion training for your supervisors. The way I always say is, people always say, who should we get done? If somebody could tell a driver to get in a vehicle and go from point A to point B, that person should have supervisor drug and alcohol training. Substance abuse professionals, one of the things that they want to see is, do you have a list of substance abuse professionals that you would be able to provide to your employee in the event they actually fail or come to you and say that they have an issue? There's plenty of places. One of the things that you can go online, it's called saplist.com. On saplist.com, if you go there, you could type in your zip code and it gives you all the available resources right in your area. You'd be able to put that on one sheet and basically just hand that right off to your driver. The clearinghouse, at this point, I would think everybody should be in the clearinghouse. There was a lot of ups and downs of trying and getting into the clearinghouse. I think at this point, everybody should be in there. But as far as your written program goes, your written program also has to talk about the clearinghouse. So a lot of times what I'm seeing when we're doing these audits, that's a big time missing piece just because of how new it is. And then if you see here in red, we have about the oral fluid. Now that has not come about yet. And the reason why it has not come about yet is because the Department of Health and Human Services has to certify 2 laboratories, one to serve as a primary laboratory and a second to serve as a split specimen laboratory. And that has not happened yet. But when that does happen, we would want that in the policy. So right now, our policies that we're creating, we are actually adding that in just because it is something that is coming. So one of the things that you learn in the reasonable suspicion training is what you need to do, and this is from the DOT standpoint, FMCSA, what type of test or when do I actually do a post-accident test on my driver? And a lot of people say, well, we do it every single time, and that sounds good, and it is good. But it actually makes it a lot more complicated. If you decide that you're going to drug test after every single accident, you would have to follow this rubric right here to see if it qualifies as a DOT recordable first. And if you see here, there's a human fatality, bodily injury, and then tow away. And if you see based on here, if it's tow away or a bodily injury, your driver actually has to receive a citation for you to be able to perform that post-accident DOT test. Now, if somebody gets killed in the accident, doesn't matter if your driver gets cited or not, you have to test your driver. Now, if you are one of those people that want to do it for every accident, that's fine. But basically what you'd have to do is you'd have to assess every single accident to see which type of test would be needed. You would have to go through this to see if a DOT test would be needed. But if it didn't qualify, then technically you'd have to do a non-DOT drug and alcohol test. The FMCSA would never ask about that or ask to see the results because they truly don't care about it. But they do care that we're making sure we're getting the post-accident test done if they fall into this criteria. Okay, jumping into the clearinghouse once again, I think at this point, a lot of people probably know and understand the clearinghouse, but I will tell you some changes that are coming. And I actually just got some verbiage on it today, actually, where they're going to be on the roadside pulling your driver's license numbers and seeing if a query has been pulled on that driver. And if a query hasn't been pulled on that driver, they could actually put that driver out of service. So pre-employment, we need to be doing those full queries, which means that the drivers actually have to have their own login and do the electronic consent, which is difficult. And then on an annual basis, we need to make sure that they're signing off on that annual query. And usually that's done upon hire. And then that general consent, basically, that one sheet of paper allows you to pull it on an annual basis thereafter. But we have to be making sure that we're getting these done because it can come back to bite us if we miss somebody on a query, whether it's a pre-employment or annual. This here just basically shows what the drivers would see when they actually do their pre-employment. It's more than just pre-employment too. If I was a driver and I failed a test, um, basically I'm sorry, if you put a query on me from a limited standpoint and it came up prohibited, you would then have to pull a full query on me. And then that point, I would have to have a login as well to consent to be able to let you pull a full query. Any sort of information that would need to be given to your employees from the clearinghouse would be done so through their login rather than sending it to them via mail if they didn't have a login. So I always just tell everybody it's good practice for your drivers to sign up for the clearinghouse. All right, so this is really the meat and potatoes of an audit. I mean, every audit I've ever been a part of, well, three main things, I guess, would be your driver qualification files, your drug and alcohol, and your vehicle maintenance. When you look at, and if you ever worked with us for us to do an audit for you, you would know that this is probably our biggest section that we go through. So for every single one of our drivers, this is what would need to be in a driver qualification file. Sometimes I go to see a customer and I get a file that's 3 inches thick, and that's every single piece of paper that ever had to do with that employee since the day they started. Now, once again, put yourself in an auditor's shoes and you make it worse on them, they could make it worse on you. So we should really concise it down to truly what you need. And don't forget when I mentioned earlier, anything that's available is auditable. So truly, we should have a DOT file and then a separate file. You want to keep everything, that's fine. Just make sure it's separate. So the things that we're going to be looking at in our driver qualification file is going to be a driver application for employment. And if you see, that's actually the regulations 391.21. That application has to be a DOT compliant application. So if you look up the regulations, there's very specific things that they want to see as far as what's on that application. And so we need to make sure that it truly is DOT compliant. Something else we're looking for is requests for safety information from previous employers. Most of this has to be directly related to accidents they had with the previous employers. And this is probably the number one thing that I see missing in driver qualification files. This used to be also attached to something that would ask for drug and alcohol information. So what you would do, if I'm John Doe and I come to work for your company, on my application, I put my past 3 years of employers, but I failed a drug test for one of those people. So I decided I'm not going to put that person on my application because then you won't be able to see it. So that's where the clearinghouse came in. Basically, it's a foolproof plan that kind of does away with that. But the piece that it's missing is asking your previous employers about the accidents that you were in. So that's something we still have to send off via paper. It is kind of prehistoric, but it is something we have to do and have to show. A lot of times you're not going to receive anything back, but we have to show some way of showing that we actually did do our due diligence and try to send it off. The other thing we'd have to do is do an initial 3-year MVR. So that's upon hire. And then on an annual basis thereafter, you're also going to be pulling an MVR. There is an annual review of the driving record. And truly what it says basically is they satisfy the requirements or they don't satisfy the requirements. So that's why it is good for us, for you guys to have an internal fleet policy probably that would outline your MVR criteria. Honestly, if you reached out to your insurance company, your insurance carrier, they would probably tell you what your carrier has an appetite for when it comes to MVRs. It's usually some sort of matrix that says minor accidents and at-fault accidents. At-fault accidents, minor violations, and major violations. So it makes it very easy. But if you want to reach out to your carrier, this way you know exactly what that criteria would be. A driver's road test, this is only actually needed in the event that your person does not have a CDL. Now, it is a good idea to do a driver's road test because these people are driving humongous billboards that have the name of your company on the side of it. So I always think it's a good idea to make sure that these drivers know what the equipment they're driving and that that they could drive it safely. So remember, a CDL satisfies the requirement. However, not a bad idea to do the driver road test. We have to have the medical examiner certificates in here and then the verification of the medical examiner certificate. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But basically, if you knew somebody that was able to pass you for a medical exam, and this is going back to 2014 when this went in place, people would basically just write you up a medical certificate. So now the FMCSA has what's called the National Registry, which means you got to be a part of that as a medical examiner. And once again, it's another step. It's a check and balance, basically. The copy of the current driver's license, and then we want proof of a pre-employment and random. If you see here as well, you would want your sign off too, which is a paper sign off for the limited queries in your driver qualification file. So going back to the National Registry, as I mentioned earlier, this went into effect May 21st, 2014. And if you go on the website, you can see right here, there's a National Registry number listed. Every single one of your employees' medical cards has a National Registry number on it. Now, all you'd have to do is go to their website, the National Registry website through the FMCSA. You would type in that National Registry number. Something like this would pop up. You could just take a snapshot, print it off, and put it in your DQ file, and that satisfies the requirement. Okay, now we're going to switch gears slightly here. So we're going to move into hours of service. Now, everything we're talking about, we're going to try to squeeze in here today. There's a lot that goes into all this and a lot that they could look at. So as far as being compliant, it is difficult unless you actually have the education and background on the compliance issues. So, for hopefully a lot of us, we could fall into the 150 air mile exemption. And what that is, and this is what you'd want to do. So a lot of people call this also the logbook exemption. So what you would have to abide by all 5 of these things that you see on the screen here. So that means a driver must start and stop from the same work location, stay within that 150 air mile radius, be off the clock completely within 14 hours, have 10 consecutive hours off duty between shifts, and then physically can't drive more than 11 hours in that day. Now, if you fall within all those 5, you could actually fall into that logbook exemption where you wouldn't have to do a logbook. And basically what you could do is a timesheet. So the timesheet's going to show you 31 days. It's going to show you all your time on, all your time off, and then total time after the 7 days. So it does make it very easy for you to be able to show a officer, hey, look, I'm under the hours of service. Now, this timesheet I'm showing you is not required if you fall under the 150 air mile exemption, but you do have to have a way of showing that officer of where your hours are at. Okay, so now switching gears. I know a lot of us probably have ELDs because, for different things that you guys travel to and whatnot, it's most likely required. But here's all the hours of service rules. So this is for not an everyday operation. So a Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday. And that's 60 hours in a 7-day period. So what that means is a driver can't drive after that 60th hour on duty. They can still work. They just can't drive after that 60th hour on duty. Same thing with the 70 and an 8-day period. This is for an everyday operation. If you truly work Monday through Sunday, then you actually have that 10 hours extra, where it's 70 in an 8-day period. But same situation, you wouldn't be able to drive after the 70th hour on duty. With both of those rules follows the 14-hour rule, which means you can't drive a motor vehicle after the 14th hour on duty for that day. And then for both of those rules, you can't physically drive more than 11 hours. Now, to bring that clock from a 60-hour or 70-hour clock back down to 0, you would use your 30-hour or 34-hour restart, which, if a lot of us have that Saturday, Sunday off, that's your 34-hour restart. But basically, if you have 34 consecutive hours between shifts, that'll bring those 60 and 70-hour clocks back down to 0. Regardless of what we're talking about, you have to have at least 10 hours off duty between your shifts. And then we need to make sure we're taking our 30-minute rest break when possible. Okay, now switching gears to vehicle inspection, repair, and maintenance. So what you're seeing right here is what I would be putting in the front of every vehicle maintenance file. The things that they're going to want to see on the file, they want to see the make, VIN, model year, tire size, company or unit number on the file. If we're missing any of those, and the biggest one I usually see that we're missing is the tire size, that would be a violation. So you don't have to use this format necessarily. Even if you used a magic marker and wrote that information on your manila folder, you would be in compliance. But what we have here, anything we talk about with vehicle maintenance, they want to see a work order based on the work that was being performed. So if you see right here, we have inspection, repair, and maintenance. So that means anytime we have to do an inspection, we would be doing a work order, a repair, a work order, or any sort of preventative maintenance, we'd have a work order. A lot of people have 1 pages for work orders, which is fine. But once again, if you want to make it easier for that auditor You could put this into a spreadsheet even and just have this, right there available to them. There's 3 ways that they actually usually audit your files. One of the ways would be looking at your SAFER report, and we're going to be talking about that here in a little bit, to see what type of inspections and violations you've had. They're then going to see that correlating date and come back to your work orders to see if something's been worked on and fixed in that situation. The other thing they'd be looking at is going to be your preventative maintenance. Your intervals, how often we doing oil changes, how often are you supposed to be rotating the tires, et cetera, et cetera. They'll look at your PMs. They will then look back at your work orders to see if there's dates and mileages, I should say, that would correlate with that. And then lastly is going to be your DVIRs, the driver vehicle inspection reports. Based off the DVIRs that your employees are writing up, they're going to go back to your work orders to see, once again, has it been fixed? So the big thing with DVIRs, and I'm just going to go right to it right here so we could see it. There's multiple things here that I look at. So number one, that we only need to keep these for 3 months. So that's all I think that we should keep them. These are the number one things that drivers probably screw up. And the big thing with DOT is form and manner. So, as they're looking at things, they're saying, is it filled out right and completely? So when our drivers are filling this out, we want to make sure they're being very descriptive up top because it's going to help us and our mechanics. The big thing that we're missing usually are the 3 signatures below here. So a driver signs off saying that there's an issue. The mechanic then would sign off saying they fixed it. And then lastly, the next driver taking that vehicle into service should sign off on that saying that, yes, the issue's been fixed. That bottom section right there is what we always see is missing as far as compliance goes. So the number one, that's why I say we should only be keeping 3 months, but also just make sure that we let our drivers know about it so they could try to police themselves a little bit better on this. But we need to try to get all 3 of those signatures. Okay, and then lastly, factor 6. And factor 6 is purely just based off of accidents per million miles driven. Okay, so we talked about the nurse, hearse, or tow. Basically, it's pass or fail. So 1.5 and less is pass. 1.51 and above is fail. So if you see here, for a million miles with 2 accidents would result in a 2.0. And a million miles is a good bit miles. So 2 accidents isn't gonna, that doesn't take us very far. So as you can see, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room when it comes to the accidents. We are going to talk about today, though, of how you could look at your own report and see if some of the accidents that are listed on there could possibly be not at fault. What they do is anytime there's an accident, they automatically group it into putting you at fault, which calculates against you on your scores. You actually have to be able to go in and say, I have a police report that says that I'm not at fault here, and go through a contestment, and you actually get it removed from your report. But it's good from a standpoint of if you're audited, they wouldn't have it. But from another point, we're going to talk about what underwriters look at from your scores. And if your scores technically could be falsely inflated based off of having accidents that truly aren't your fault that are calculating high scores. And that's what this is called. It's called the Crash Preventability Determination Program. So it's something that the FMCSA put together. So basically, if one of your crashes fall into that nurse, hearse, or tow, automatically you're going to be falling under that category. If you have a police report to show that you're not at fault, you could then go through what's called a data queue process, which is just an online thing, and you can test it. And basically, then they update their system and do not count that crash against you. We're going to talk about the scores here, but I just wanted to show you this one real quick. Every single category is from 1 to 100%. So anytime you have one of these recordable crashes, it will calculate against your basic score and crash. Some of the other things I wanted to show you guys here is some of your violations and fines. So this is just an example. If you could see, and this is from the SAFER website. So truly, if you went into Google and you typed in the word SAFER, you'll probably see one of the first things that's going to pop up. It's going to say company snapshot. When you click on company snapshot, you can type in your DOT number or the name of your company, and it's going to give you all your information as far as what your MCS 150 snapshot looks like and all your safety measurement system information, which is what I'm showing you here, which is all the roadside violations that you've had in the past 24 months. So when you're reading this, just to give everybody an example, when it's white like this and you don't see anything underneath it, that actually means that you went through an inspection without a violation. Every time you do that, that is a good thing because it pads your score essentially. So when we go through inspections with no violations, it helps us. Anytime there's anything gray like this underneath your score, that means you went through that inspection and received a violation. When you see multiple underneath that, that means that you went through that inspection and received multiple violations. Now, where it hurts us big time is from the severity weight and the time weight. The severity weight, if you see here, every violation has a severity weight from 1 to 10, 10 being the worst. And then if you're out of service, meaning out of service, they had to red tag you essentially, put you out of service because it was bad enough that they didn't want the vehicle to move. That could be a vehicle maintenance issue, or let's just say it's a driver that's under the influence, or maybe they have an expired CDL or something like that. So technically, the most you can get on one violation would be a 12. But what hurts us big time is this time weight. So if you see it goes from a 3 to a 2 and then eventually down to a 1. So the 3 is going to multiply our entire inspection severity weight by 3. So this one up top here would be 21 actually. Now that counts against us from month 1 to month 6. From month 7 to 12, it goes down to a 2. And then that whole last year, and this whole snapshot is a 24-month snapshot. That whole last year, it's actually going to be only down to a 1, so the true severity. So all that stuff is calculated into our numbers, and which hurts us. The other thing I wanted to show you guys here quickly was a snapshot. We talked about how to get into Safer. If you went into Safer and put in your information, this is going to be your company snapshot. A couple of things I wanted to point out here that we should be looking at is your MCS 150 form date. So the way that that's based on is your DOT number, and it's the last 2 digits of your DOT number. So for number's sake, let's just say it said 5 and 2. 5 would mean odd years, and 2 would mean in February. So that's how it is. The second to last number is the year, and the last number is the month. That tells you when you're supposed to do an MCS 150. The other thing we should be looking at is mileage. You should be truly accounting for every single mile that you possibly can when we're doing our MCS 150. Reasoning for that, it's part of the algorithm that calculates our scores. And remember, we're looking at the scores from not just the compliance standpoint and keeping the DOT offer back, but also improving your risk profile and making you more attractive to the marketplace when it comes to insurance. Now, the problem is, if you see down here, some of the requirements and some of the calculations for your scores is based off what you're putting in there, as mentioned, like the mileage. The other thing would be the type of commodities. You know, if you're a tree company and you have US mail as one of your commodities, that's not a good thing, and it would probably look unfavorable upon carriers, and I mean insurance carriers. So making sure that this is all calculated right and everything looks right, it behooves you to make sure we log in and look at that. Now, if you see this right here, this is not authorized, don't be alarmed. That's what I mentioned about earlier. If you see this company in particular, they're private property, and they're not for hire. So that's okay. That means you should be not authorized. That means you don't have an MC number, and you're not authorized for hire. So if you're a private property and you say not authorized, that is actually accurate. Now, if you're interstate crossing state lines and you show for hire here, and this says not authorized, then there is an issue. And then, you know, you can always reach out to us and we can help you look at that. I mentioned earlier about the DOT, if they actually were to come in to do an audit of what that would look like. And like I said, you would get a safety condition or unsatisfactory, but a lot of us probably today have never been audited. So we might actually have a not rated rating, and that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. So if the DOT were to come in today and audit you, let's just say they give you a conditional rating, they're going to ask you to put a corrective action into place. When you put that corrective action in place, the best you can do is go back to your previous rating, which would be not rated. Once again, it's just as good as a satisfactory. Okay, so for those of us, I don't know on this call if you ever seen a CAB report, CAB. CAB report is from Central Analysis Bureau. It's a third party. They're probably the most popular company out there, but there's several companies like them out there. One thing I'll mention to you, we do have access to that. If you did want to see your report and what was on it, I'd be happy to share it with you. And I'll give you some how to reach out to us later. But this is what the underwriters are looking at, and actually the FMCSA is looking at as well. But the underwriters have it now through that Central Analysis Bureau, and there's probably not, well, I know there's not a commercial auto insurance carrier in the United States that doesn't have CAB or something similar to CAB. And obviously, if you put yourself in an underwriter's shoes, I want to see what your scores are in these categories and where you're falling with your peers. Um, Now this is actually a real one. This is probably the worst one I've ever seen, but um, once again, if you're in that underwriter's shoes and you see this, it's going to be bad. Same thing from the FMCSA standpoint. If you're in these alert statuses, you're usually going to get a letter stating, hey, crash indicators through the roof. We need to see an improvement over the next several months. If not, we're going to come in to do an audit. So there's some things like I just mentioned to you earlier, mileage, making sure that we have the right amount of drivers, the right amount of power units, making sure we're actually selecting the right commodities. Some of this stuff you might be able to change if it's wrong, and you might drop out of some of these alert statuses just by doing that. I mentioned about the crashes. If we can actually contest those crashes to show that you're truly not at fault, it would then once again drop your scores. So there's some things that we could do right off the bat to fix your numbers. Now I want to talk about the ISS score. So all of these scores here, which is unsafe driving, hours of service, driver fitness, vehicle maintenance, crash indicator, all of those calculate what our ISS score is. The ISS score is from 1 to 100. And what that does is tell, if you see up top here, inspect, optional, and pass, it tells the officer of what type of inspection to do on your vehicle. So if you look right here, this is a bad picture, but the important piece is this bottom piece. This is from a Pennsylvania state trooper's computer inside his vehicle. And the point of it is when you go through a weigh station, or let's just say your driver gets pulled over for speeding, what they're going to do is they're going to put your DOT number in their computer, and they're going to look to see what your inspection value says. Now, if you're in that inspect phase, which is from 75 to 100, they're going to do a level 1 inspection. And a level 1 inspection encompasses the driver and the vehicle. And a lot of times can take anywhere from, an hour and a half to 2 hours. And if you have a lot of inspections and you're in that inspect phase, you're talking about a lot of downtime for your drivers. The other thing too, if they're doing a 2-hour inspection, they're usually going to find something. So if there's one thing that we're trying to do from, once again, a compliance standpoint, making sure that we're profitable and keeping our employees working and not being an inspection, insurance, it is this ISS score. This is the number one thing that we should be controlling on our numbers. Now, if you have a PIN number through the FMCSA, you could actually look this up yourself on Safer. But once again, if anybody's interested in seeing their cab report, please reach out to the DOT helpline, which I'll share here at the end, with your DOT number, and we'd be happy to share your report with you. So one of the things I just wanted to point out from the underwriter's perspective, what they do is, if you look at a bell curve, they take all their information like losses, the cab report, all that kind of stuff, and they push you to the middle. Now, if we could improve your scores through compliance, your cab report, show that trend in the downward way, that is going to put you on the left side of the curve. With everything going on in the United States when it comes to insurance, it's really hard to say, hey, you're going to get better or a cheaper premium. But what you can do by doing the things we just talked about today is position yourself to put you in the best light possible when it comes to the marketplace. And basically what you want to do is tell that story. We talked about some of your scores. If you could start doing some of those things and improving your scores, if you show a trend down in those scores over time, once again, that's stuff that an underwriter wants to see. And hopefully, maybe you're with a high risk carrier. Maybe you want to get more with one of those standard carriers that would have better rates. This is the story we want to tell. If you have something like telematics, GPS or cameras, anything like that, show your driver scores, show that trend over time and where your drivers are at. This one in particular, if you look on the right-hand side, this shows a driver score from 850 to an average of a 950 over a 3-month period by doing some different things. The one below that shows speeding, 0.01% of speed time and over 3,000 hours of being on the road. Everybody probably on this call has some sort of story like that to tell. You just need to be telling that story. And lastly, just kind of want to tell everybody how we kind of bring it together. So these are the services we offer. We do offer a mock DOT audit where we come in and act as if we are the DOT, go through samples of all the files and stuff that we talked about today. But the big piece is that you actually get the education and the tools to apply to your business. So an example, like the driver qualification file, you would get everything that you would need within that, the application, the review of the driver record, et cetera, et cetera. That's all part of the audit and education. The other piece that we do any sort of training that you could think of. We do offer a web-based DOT compliance, basically where you would outsource DOT compliance to us. We would onboard your drivers. We would set them up with the drug test, pull their MVRs, pull their queries, et cetera, et cetera. With GPS, if you guys do have GPS or telematics or cameras, we offer another layer there where we actually review it on behalf of you. Once again, anything we're talking about here is just to always say is we're on staff, but we're not on payroll. So an example would be we go in, we review all the data. We give you reports, we give suggestions for improvement. But basically what we're doing is just keeping an eye on all of the issues that you're having through the telematics. Usually a lot of people wear more than one hat, and the telematics seems to take a back seat. But if we're actually doing something with that information, as I showed you on that narrative, the previous slide, you can see those downward trends and we can tell that different story. Cab and safer reviews, as I mentioned to you guys. If anybody wants to see a safer, I'd be happy to do so. And then the DOT compliance helpline, which is right here. So if you went to DOT helpline at keystoneinsgrp.com, like I said, if you just ask us for your or put your DOT number in there, we'd be happy to send you the report. Once you guys look that report over, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to do a consultation with you just to show some of the things I'm seeing. And that's about it. So Jesse, there you
Thank
go.
you, Michael. Yeah, we did have at least one question in the Q&A, and it's and then there was another kind of related question that I think was answered, but what parts of this are exempt for employees that are not CDL but carrying over 10,000 pounds intrastate and not for hire?
That's a good point. So every state now, I will say, has their own regulations. But however, most states adopt the federal regulations. So saying that you said 10,000 makes me think it's the federal regulation. So everything we talked about basically today, everything minus drug and alcohol. So that would mean you don't have to do the random testing, you wouldn't do pre-employment, and you wouldn't do clearinghouse. Other than that, everything we talked about would apply. In CDL, obviously, no CDL.
So the other question was, is Part 380 applicable for firms that don't have any CDL drivers?
Sorry, say that again.
It says, is Part 380 applicable for firms that don't have any CDL drivers?
Well, no, because the entry level driver training would be for CDL drivers only. So you wouldn't have to worry about that. No.
Okay. And then there was one person that had their hand up, but I didn't know if they actually had a question or not. So if anybody has any questions, please make sure to put those in the Q&A so that we can answer them.
And I will put the DOT helpline in the chat real quick, just so everybody has it.
And then again, I am recording this webinar, so if you'd like to review it afterwards, it will be available on YouTube. I'll send that in an email to everyone following this. And then, and that will also include the presentation. So if you want to go back and review the helpline number or find Michael's contact information, it'll be in there as well. All right, and I'm also going to put in the chat the form to fill out if you need ISA CEUs. So please fill that out if you need the CEUs. If anybody has any questions, it was Charlie that has his hand raised. So Charlie, ask your question if you speak now.
One thing I'll mention too, just, a lot of times, I don't know why, but people will say, I feel bad reaching out, like I'm bothering you. You're not bothering us. I mean, what we'll do is, the consultation is free for us to go through your report and just let you know what we see. If we did anything additional, that obviously that would be up to you. So, use your free resources while you can. And Jesse, I'm sending you the PowerPoint now.
Perfect. Thank you. I will try to get that recording to everyone by the end of the day today. I'm going to put the form in the chat again. And if for some reason you have trouble with the form, you can always email me afterwards and I'll help you with that. But it is in the chat, so make sure to look for that there. Okay, well, I guess if nobody has any other questions, then you can also always call the helpline to ask your questions if you don't feel comfortable asking them on here. And that, like he said, is free to our members for the first couple of questions. If you have extensive questions, they may start to charge you, but make sure to utilize that resource that is available to you, or send an email to Michael directly. All right, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and thank you to everyone for joining us, and stay tuned. I will put my email in the chat as well. Stay tuned for the next in our webinar series, which will be on November 12th. I'll send out registration information for that as soon as I have that from the rest of the organizers. So thank you everyone for attending, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.